I haven't been able to stop thinking about a Coke bottle. If you listen to my conversation with Sunnye in the last episode, you probably already know what I'm talking about. She had moved away from home to Washington, D.C. for a journalism job within the government. Huge. She was young. She was 22. Beginning her career, living on her own, and doing what so many of us are taught we're supposed to do. Leave home, get the job, become independent, build your life. And then one day, standing in her new apartment, all alone, she couldn't open a Coke bottle. Such a small thing. Except it really wasn't. Because in that moment, she realized there wasn't anyone there with her to hand it to. She was really on her own. And when Sunnye told me that story, it brought tears to my eyes, partly because I could imagine that young woman standing there. But I also realized something else. I had never met her, and I desperately had wished I had. I desperately had wished I was there to help her open that Coke bottle. Luckily, I know Sunnye now. I know the woman who is confident in her faith, the storyteller, the creative, the woman who can look back over nearly 5 decades of wonderful, blissful ups and downs, but blissful life, and tell you what she's learned. But I didn't know that, Sunnye. And suddenly, sitting across from my friend, I was being introduced to a version of her that had existed long before I came along. Hi, I'm Jacqueline, and welcome back to Pace. I've been thinking about how many versions of ourselves exist inside the person we are today. There are versions of you that the people who currently love you have never, ever met. Maybe they didn't know you when you were scared. Maybe they didn't know you before you became a parent, or before the marriage, or before the divorce, or before you found God, before you lost something, before the career, before you became confident, before you learned to say no and have boundaries, before you understood what you needed. And yet, those versions of you are still there. They aren't gone. They helped build the person sitting right here, right now. You. I think sometimes when we talk about starting over, we unintentionally dismiss everything that came before. We say, back at square one. I have to start all over. Or I wasted all those years. But did you? Did you really? Because square one doesn't know what you know now. You do. You definitely do. Another part of Sunnye's story stayed with me. It was a part where she had what people considered a good government job. And when she realized she wasn't happy doing the work anymore, guess what people did? They encouraged her to stay. Because why would you leave a good job? Right? And that's such an interesting question. Because sometimes something can be objectively amazing and good and wonderful. can still no longer be good for you. A good job, a good opportunity, a good relationship, a good city, a good plan. Sometimes the hardest thing to leave aren't the obviously bad things. They're the things that aren't terrible enough to justify leaving. But yet they just aren't right enough to make us want to stay. And that's where knowing yourself becomes so important, so vital. Because eventually you have to ask, am I staying because this still fits me? Or because leaving something quote unquote good is difficult to explain to everybody else? There are seasons when staying is, in fact, real wisdom. And there are seasons when patience is inevitably necessary. That's part of pace too. But there are also seasons when we know something has completed its purpose in our lives, and recognizing that doesn't make what came before a mistake. It simply means something has changed, and maybe that something is you. Sunnye said something during our conversation that I've continued to think about. The second act is always tougher than the first. That's what she said. She also said that the second act is about self-actualization, and she talked about how it's, really the good part where, the hero realizes who they are in the story, but they come up with lots of opposition during this time before they make it to the end goal. At first, I wondered why. Why is the second act tougher? Shouldn't it be easier? You're older. You're wiser. You've survived some things. You know more. But maybe that's exactly why. It's harder. Because the first act often comes with instructions. It's the base. You're setting it up. You go to school, you get a job, you build a career, you find somebody, you get married, you have children, you buy the house, keep climbing. Whatever version of that list you were handed, there was usually some kind of script. But by the time you reach your second act, you've lived enough life to start questioning that script. You know that getting something you wanted doesn't guarantee fulfillment at this point. And you know that people change, and you know plans change. And you also know you change. You know time passes much faster than you thought it would, and now you're being asked to choose again. Except this time, you're choosing with your eyes wide open. To me, that's harder. But there's something beautiful about it too, because now you're not simply choosing the life you were told to want. You actually have an opportunity to choose a life that actually belongs to you, that fits and feels good. Sunnye's life didn't follow every traditional milestone. Obviously in the traditional order. She didn't marry. She didn't have children. And yet her life continued to unfold. Her relationship with God deepened. Her creativity grew. And storytelling became part of her purpose. Media, short films, new possibilities, and even love. At 49, there are still things happening, still discoveries, and still beginnings, and still parts of Sunnye we haven't yet met. And I think somebody needs to hear that. Because We have a terrible habit of treating certain ages as expiration dates, as though there is an acceptable window for becoming. No. An acceptable window for love? No. An acceptable window for changing careers? Nope. An acceptable window for discovering purpose? Absolutely not. An acceptable window for beginning again? No. Because remember, we're not behind. Life doesn't always honor the timelines we've created for it, and we know this as well. And I like to believe and think that that's okay. A life that looks different from what you expected is not automatically an incomplete life. Sometimes it's simply a life still being written, still being lived. There's a scripture in Isaiah 43 that says, "See, I am doing a new thing. Now it springs up. Do you not perceive it?" And oh my God, do I love that. Because God doesn't say the old thing never mattered. He says he's doing a new thing. There is room for both. Gratitude for what was and expectation for what can still be. Sometimes I think we're just so busy mourning the ending that we don't recognize what is beginning. Or we're so embarrassed that something didn't work out the way we expected it that we fail to recognize everything it taught us. But maybe faith in a second act looks like saying, "God, I don't know exactly what this part of the story looks like, but I know you were with me in the first act. And I trust you here too." So maybe you're listening to this and you're somewhere in your own transition, because isn't that life? Maybe you're considering leaving something. Maybe something already ended. Maybe the children are getting older. Maybe you're starting a career later than you planned. Maybe you're dating again, returning to school, or rediscovering your faith. Maybe there's something you've wanted to create for years now, or maybe nothing dramatic has happened at all. You just know this version of my life has run its course. And you're wondering, what comes next? What else is there? Well, I don't know. I don't know what comes next for you, but I do know this. You're not standing where you stood the first time. You know things now. You've loved, you've learned, you've made mistakes, you've survived disappointments, you've discovered boundaries, and you've changed your mind, you've become more discerning, you've learned what matters. And hopefully you've learned a little more about you. So no, you're not starting over. You're starting from experience. Before we close, I really want you to think about the earlier version of yourself. The version that got you here. Maybe it's the 20-year-old you or the 30-year-old you. I don't know. Maybe it's you from 5 years ago. Or maybe it's you from 6 months ago. Instead of being embarrassed by what they didn't know, thank them. They were doing the very best they could do with the information they had. My mom says that all the time. And everything we've learned has been handed right back to us We don't have to rush into whatever comes next. We don't have to have the entire second act figured out before the curtain rises. We just simply have to be willing to recognize when life is inviting us forward. I'm going to take the wisdom, and I'm going to take the lessons, and I'm going to take my faith. And I want you to do the same. I want you to take the parts of yourself you discovered along the way and move forward at a pace that allows you to actually experience what's next. Because your first act mattered. Your second act matters. And if you're fortunate enough to have a third or a fourth or a fifth, those will matter too. Your life isn't late. Your story isn't finished. And you are not starting over. You're starting from experience. Thank you so much for being here. Until next time, this is Pace.